Day to all. Today we discuss about the topic which is related to spring manufacturing with the lathe. Generally, springs are not manufactured with the aid of lathe and any other machine tools. But this class discussed about how do we manufacture the spring with the aid of lathe. Already we discussed about a workhorse. How do we communicate or how do we utilize the other machines, particular machines for other purposes like this we discussed. Today we create the product with the aid of machines, other machines also. Okay, generally springs are manufactured with the rolling operation, but how do I manufacture the springs with lathe? Okay, today class goes like this. Myself, Dr. B. Suresh Kumar, Department of Mechanical Engineering. The spring. Generally, spring is a flexible element that used to exert a force or a torque and at the same time to store energy. In flywheels, also used for stores energy, but in simple mechanisms, we are placing the springs for stores the energy. Okay, the force can be a linear push or pull. You may apply the push force or pull force, which means you may do the tension or compression on the springs, which can be elaborated, expanded, okay, based upon the force, or it can be radial. Radial force also can be applied on the spring. Okay, the torque can also be used to cause required motion. Likewise, different force we can exert on the spring, and also we can get the energy from the spring. Okay, then generally the springs are damaged because of heavy load. Due to the heavy loading condition, the springs are springs are getting failure or fractured. For the reason, the springs are replaced in circular or rectangular manner. In the springs manufacturing procedure, the springs are generally manufactured with a roller. Before rolling operation, the billets are converted into wire form. That wire forms are getting into the heat treatment. Based on the heat treatment, the wire fed into the rollers. After the roller, the die is happening. The die is converted that circular wire it into springs as like this diagram. This is a previous work available with the spring manufacturing. What we have to do is see. Let me see what our work. Generally, springs with rectangular cross section can give higher resilience than circular cross section. So, why we utilize circular cross section only for making a springs? In die manufacturing, I mean die utilization, the circular springs are not utilized because the circular springs have lesser resilience than square rectangular cross sectional springs. Here, what is the resilience? The ability of a material to return to its original length or shape when load is removed is known as resilience. Okay, higher resilience withstands greater deflection and also gives higher forces. So that where the higher forces or higher loads available, circular cross-sectional wire is not suitable because the circular cross-section with higher loading means it will be failed. Okay, so failure occurs with the circular cross-section. So what can we do? We go for rectangular cross-section wires for higher resilience springs. Okay, how do I manufacture the rectangular springs? Because the rectangular cross section is not available with the rolling operation. Because if I utilize the rolling means the circular cross section is most suitable because the bending operations not affect the circular shape. But if I utilize the rectangular cross section means the rectangular cross section is converted into trapezoidal shape, so that from the trapezoidal shape also we can't get the higher resilience, so that the uniformity of rectangular cross section is important. For the reason, how do I manufacture? Here you see, I first initially utilize the raw material as like our lathe turning job. Number one, the plane shaft I took. Okay, after that I produce the gear shape. I mean threading operation. After the second operation is threading operation. From threading operation, I can make the square threads on the given workpiece. Okay. After that, after producing the square threads, I utilize the gear drilling operation for making a hole on center of that spring. I remove the inside materials Okay, after that I cut where the spring is started, I cut it to the spring. The fourth step is spring. So that four steps is available. First step I turn the workpiece. Second step I form the thread on workpiece material. Third step, center drill, it makes the center hole and remove the excess material from the workpiece. Fourth step is cut the spring. Okay, fourth step is cut the required spring from the workpiece. Which are all the steps available with the spring manufacturer on the lathe. Now let me see how do I fix the job on lathe, how do we turn the job, and how do we make the final spring. Let me see with this video. The normal CNC turning operation I have carried out for turning and forming the threads on the workpiece. Okay, the turret is moved on the workpiece. The thread forms the thread formation on the workpiece. From this, I can create the square threads on the workpiece material. Which is a normal threading operation available with our CNC machines. Okay, so that we won't go for any special program, we won't go for any special toolings for creating the square thread. Normal square thread we can make with the CNC turning center. Here you see the thread is made on a given workpiece, which is the initial step of spring manufacturing with the lathe. Okay, how do I make the center drill? Here you see the number of passes. You may utilize the number of passes for making the exact depth on the workpiece material. Okay, exact depth on the thread. Okay, the number of passes you may increase and get the spring. Okay, spring shape on the workpiece. Okay, so this kind of operations is needed for making a springs with the help of CNC turning center. Okay. The operator gives lot of passes for producing the smooth surfaces. Okay. Then finally, the center material of the produced helical spring I removed. Okay, we removed from the workpiece. The third step we carried out with the center drill. By the use of center drill or normal drill, we can remove the center part of the workpiece material. Finally, we may cut the spring from the workpiece material. Now you are aware about number of steps. Number one, making a normal turning operation. Number two, making a thread on the given workpiece material. Number three, remove the workpiece material from the center of the workpiece. Then fourth is the cutout of spring from the raw material. Likewise, we follow the methods. Okay, here you see the different workpiece material. We can utilize the different materials, alloy material or otherwise steel materials. We can utilize for making the springs with the aid of these processes, which is known as workhorse, because we utilizing the turning machine for making a spring also, so that we can get the different material springs to the aid of turning center. Okay, in previous video I told about how do we utilize vertical milling machine for magnetic float polishing. Today this video explains about how do we manufacture the springs with the aid of turning centers. Okay, now you are aware about how do we apply the turning center for producing the springs. So that the spring manufacturing is very easy with the aid of normal shop floor. We don't need any special equipment for producing the springs, and which is also very cheapest one compared with the other process. And also the rectangular springs we can make easily from this process, because we can get a higher resilience than circular cross section springs. Okay, which is the important step available. And also, if you want to make a rectangular spring, means you utilize the rollers. The rectangular shape is converted into trapezoidal shape. The trapezoidal shape means we can't able to get the higher resilience, so that we can restore the higher resilience on rectangular springs with the aid of lathe process. Okay. Thank you all. If you have any doubts, you may ask me through comment box. Thank you.